At first glance, I was like, okay, this isn't really that big of a deal. This is fine. I mean, the Minnesota Wild are getting themselves Declan Chisholm off of waivers. This is a guy going from Winnipeg over to the Wild, and this is going to be an interesting experiment, because for Minnesota, they recently got Will Butcher, they recently got Chisholm, they're adding D-men, they're hopefully going to be giving them roles, and all in all, it's not the most important move in the world, right? But upon further review, I feel like this waiver claim comes in a series of claims and acquisitions that have absolutely befuddled many on the Jets fan base, because this may be indicative of a bigger problem with Winnipeg. Now, no, I'm not talking about the NHL standings. When it comes to that, the Jets are doing all right. They are still 6th overall in the NHL. They've kind of faltered a little bit from 1st overall. They're 6-3-1 in their last 10, so they have been losing a few games here and there. Vancouver, shout out to my Canucks for still being 1st. But this Declan Chisholm acquisition by Minnesota pissed off a lot of Winnipeg Jets fans. And not because Declan Chisholm is this amazing, number one guy. I mean, he's fine. 24 years old, 6'1", 190, a left-handed defenseman, signed till the end of this season, making $775,000. Chisholm this year only played 2 games for the Winnipeg Jets. He had 1 point in 2 games, and he had spent some time in the AHL too, getting 5 points in 6 games. Last year with the Manitoba Moose, 43 points in 59 games played, so you could definitely see that the OHL scoring touch that Chisholm possessed was being carried over into the AHL in a professional capacity. This was a young guy, a very talented guy, who was taken in the 5th round back in 2018, so definitely a good progression for a guy who was taken that late. I mean, you rarely see 5th round guys, 150th overall guys ever play in the NHL. But for Declan Chisholm getting claimed by the Minnesota Wild, it opens the door to a bigger conversation as to what the Winnipeg Jets are doing with their defense. Take a look at this tweet made by Spino Hockey on Twitter that goes out there and highlights just a bunch of the moves that this team has made. Take a look at this. Firstly, they traded up to draft Logan Stanley in 2016. Second point, Jonathan Kovacevic was lost to Montreal on waivers to keep Stanley as a 7th defenseman on the team. Kovacevic is currently playing in the Habs' top 6. Third point, Mason Appleton was lost to Seattle when the Winnipeg Jets protected Logan Stanley over Appleton in the expansion draft. They then traded a 4th-round pick later that same season to get Appleton back. Number 4, Declan Chisholm was lost on waivers to open up a roster spot. Meanwhile, Logan Stanley remains unplayed. Number 5, Ville Heinola would likely leapfrog him as a 7th D as of now. And number 6, Logan Stanley requested a trade late last season, and the Jets were rumored to have received interest for him from other teams earlier this season. Logan Stanley, everybody, seems to be public enemy number 1 when it comes to the way the Winnipeg Jets are traversing their defense core. Not necessarily, again, because Logan Stanley is the best player in the world. He just happens to be 6'7", 231. The Winnipeg Jets want to keep this guy, they want to give him a role, and they like his overall profile, which is not, unexplainable. It's easy to see why they'd like a guy who is this big, but with the way Logan Stanley has played, I mean, he hasn't really progressed point production-wise, he hasn't really gotten significantly better, and now he's requesting a trade. Because of the fact that this is the guy that they ended up keeping over Kovacevic, who was lost to waivers, over Declan Chisholm, who was lost to waivers, over Mason Appleton, who was lost to the expansion draft and then traded back for with a 4th-round pick, this idea of the Winnipeg Jets committing so much to Logan Stanley seems to have bite them in the back so much in hindsight because they're losing players to keep Stanley around. And there are a lot of replies here that's like, satirical, oh, but he's 6'7". Every team in the league here has its Logan Stanley moment. You're eventually just gonna lay an egg. Looking at the prospect cupboard currently, I think we'll be just fine though. And then there are some other tweets like this one from Peg City Hockey. By the way, big friend of mine. I'm not too sure if most of y'all are familiar with this, but Peg City Hockey and I actually were in the same high school class multiple years in a row. So the fact that we're both doing stuff on hockey YouTube now, it's pretty cool. But he went out there and said, yeah, this is a joke. That makes 3 quality players that Jets have given away for free on waivers recently, all to keep the bum Logan Stanley. So this seems to be a growing sentiment amongst the fans that maybe the way the Jets are traversing their situation with these guys is not the most appropriate. If we go over to each of them, I mean, look at Jonathan Kovacevic right now. Not saying he's the best player in the world, far from it I would say, but he's here. 26 years old, 6'5", right-handed guy, signed in Montreal making below $1 million, and he's playing games. He's got 8 points in 41, and he is, for the most part, okay. He's one of the many guys rotating around in the bottom of the Canadiens' defense core. They've got a lot of D-men in the Montreal system, a lot of D-men in the Laval system. Kovacevic is just finding himself ways to stay in the lineup. Mason Appleton is on the Winnipeg Jets again, but that's after he was sent over to the Seattle Kraken. He was pretty good over there. So the fact that the Jets just left him exposed, they protected Stanley, they let him go, and then they traded back for him, you could say that's a very redundant type of moveset. If you're protecting the guy in Logan Stanley that was inevitably going to ask out and that you were inevitably going to include in trade conversations down the line. Now, maybe 2 years ago in 2022, when the expansion draft happened, 2021, excuse me, you didn't know that Logan Stanley was going to go down this path, but it was clear from a lot of Jets fans' perspectives that this was the overall decision-making process behind it. Hey, we like Logan Stanley a lot, so we're just going to keep him, and we're going to sacrifice all these other quality players because of it. Now you have Declan Chisholm, who was lost on waivers because Stanley was unplayed and they just didn't want to send him down, and Chisholm is a fairly good NHL prospect who did have a good resume in the AHL. So sticking around in Minnesota, let's see if we get ourselves like a Chisholm-Will Butcher pairing sometime down the line. Those are the 2 new defensemen that the Minnesota Wild ended up getting, so if this is able to work out, then hey, big ups to Declan Chisholm. I'm not going to say that he's going to be like a 40, 50, 60-point guy in the NHL, but if he maxes out getting, let's say, 25 to 30 points in a year, that's pretty all right. And he's only 24 years old, so there still is a lot of time for him to grow, especially since he hasn't had sustained NHL time in the past. There really is just a new profile here to be discovered at the top league in the world. And the fact that he was a 5th-round pick just makes it even better, you know? Talk about diamond in the rough, eh? As for the other guys, I mean, everybody brings up Michael Asimon's name as well, because he was also a name that the Winnipeg Jets lost on waivers due to them prioritizing that Logan Stanley deal. Take a look at this, eh? Winnipeg Jets over to San Jose. This was when the Sharks claimed Asimon off of waivers back in 2023, so a year ago, and then he was sent over to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Asimon's doing all right now. I mean, take a look at his production with Tampa. 49 games played and 15 points. That's not bad in the slightest for a sub $1 million guy signed for 2 years. So for the Lightning, they got themselves a guy. Winnipeg got themselves their guy back after trading for him. Kovacevic is in Montreal. Declan Chisholm, Minnesota. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as to how the Winnipeg Jets have been traversing this entire situation. They've lost out on a bunch of guys. They're doing it to keep Logan Stanley. Stanley trade rumors are still running rampant, but for now, you could say this is a pretty big problem, and I don't think it's really easy to hide it at this point. So let me know your thoughts in the comments section below about the Winnipeg Jets and their procedures in keeping Logan Stanley, whether or not this is right, wrong, or whatever. If I'm getting the story wrong, then hey, feel free to correct me. I'm just taking a look at some of the stuff I'm reading online and deciding to make a video about it, but for now, I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.